and welcome to Unidentified with Lyndall K.
Do you ever get tired of introducing me all the time?
Yeah, I get tired of saying Lyndall K. Lyndall K, the K Files. It's just everywhere.
My wife gets really tired of me. All right. So, like I said before the break, we're going to talk about a case that I have been working on my entire reporting career.
Wow.
Right? So we're going to talk about Bear Creek this week. Now, there's a couple different Bear Creeks in North Carolina.
That?
There's one in over by Sanford, in barbecue area, and then there's one down by the beach in the Jacksonville area. So that's the one we're going to be talking about today. Here's a map, folks. You can see there's Jacksonville, Camp Lejeune, and then Bear Creek is this little tiny community with about 10 people in it.
Wow.
Over here, right? So, all right. I lived near that area for about 5 years when I worked at the Jacksonville Daily News, and that's when I first started writing about this case. And this is a computer sketch of who we're talking about today. Her skeleton was found in December 1991 by raccoon hunters. We talk about how hunters always find the bodies. The remains belong to a 20 to 30-year-old white woman. Her cause of death couldn't be determined because there was no detectable injuries, but homicide was listed as the manner of death due to the isolated location where her skeleton was found.
Right.
Okay. So if you noticed on the sketch, the jaw was blurry, pixelated, and the reason for that is because her jawbone was never recovered. Right, so they don't know what the jawline looks like because the jawbone was never recovered. So in her dental chart right here, it shows you can see that the jaw is blank because they don't know. That's just a standardized thing, but you can see the markings on it. She had very little gum disease, very good teeth. She had an upper molar that had been extracted with a healed socket. Over there where the X is at the back, your wisdom teeth basically.
Yeah.
And she had a chipped tooth that had been restored right up front. You can see, so she had like a porcelain thing on it.
Yeah.
So if that rings anybody's bell, if they're looking for somebody.
That's important.
All right, so this is Donnie Worrell. He was a career lawman that I know very well. He retired last year after 35 years on the job. Right, he worked for the Onslow County Sheriff's Office mostly, but he spent a few years at Jacksonville Police Department as well. The Bear Creek skeleton was his first case as a new crime scene investigator. So that was the very first found body that he investigated as a crime scene investigator, and he carried that case with him all the way through, all the way up to when he retired, he was the chief deputy in Onslow County. He had the rank of colonel. He was the highest ranking deputy in Onslow County when he retired. All right, so over the years, and like I said, I've been writing about this case from the very beginning of my career back in the early 2000s. Right. So a lot of suspects have come and gone in that time period, and there's some pretty interesting stories to be told here, right? So the first one is John D. Smallwood, right? He was he was into a little bit of everything in Hubert, which is a town between Jacksonville and Bear Creek. He was kind of like a Robin Hood type fella. He was into drugs and everything else, but he also treated his neighbors good, and everybody loved him. He was one of those, well-beloved kind of people. He was a patched pagan, which means, he was a member of the Pagan Motorcycle Club, right? And not just an associate or an affiliate. I mean, he wore the colors and was approved to do so. That's not easy to Hell's Angels, the Pagans. It's not easy to get to be a real member of that organization. All right, so he was killed in his living room in 2010, right? He was eating a cup of pudding, a very ignoble death for such a man that lived such a crazy life. But he's eating a cup of pudding in his living room. Somebody shoots him right between the eyes, right? God. So his murder is still unsolved, right? And the reason it's still unsolved is everybody's pretty sure that his roommate did it. The police, actually the deputies, interviewed the roommate, let him go because they had to. They interviewed him. He left. They've never been seen again. So either the Pagans or John Deese's family got a hold of this guy and made him disappear, right? So that's where how that case. He was a suspect in the Bear Creek skeleton case for a little while. They determined that he was not involved. He was involved in probably everything else, every other crime in that community, but just not that one. When I was writing about John Deese's death, I went to a bar in Hubert to try to talk to people about that.
Right.
And I remember I was talking to the bartender, and there was these two pagans that were sitting at the end of the bar, and they just start banging their fist on the bar like that. You know, it was the scariest moment of my life, and I've had people pull guns on me, but they were just some terrifying people. So I left that bar, and pretty daggum quickly. All right, so like I said, John Dee was he was a suspect in the skeleton case, but they ruled him out, right?
Right.
So I just want to give folks a inside look at how these cases can be roller coasters, right? You get all excited that you've found out who this person is, and the rug gets pulled out from under you, and that's for the family, that's for law enforcement.
That's got to be so frustrating for law enforcement.
It is. It absolutely is.
Oh, we're about to close this case. We're about to solve this case.
And then boom. Yep. All right. So here's
start all over.
Yeah, and here we're starting over this guy. Here's Alan Robert Davis. He killed a couple women in Florida back in the early '90s at the same time that the Bear Creek skeleton showed up. Right. So if you look at this newspaper from that time period, this is the Florida Alligator. There's a crazy name for a newspaper, but look how
not in Florida.
Look how nice that. Yeah, right. Look how nice that newspaper looks. I mean, look at the pictures.
It is very nice.
Show them the next page, Brittany, on that. I mean, look at that woman's face. Imagine how that looked in color, right?
Sure.
This kind of off the subject, but newspapers are dying. It's their own fault, you know. It's not the internet's fault. Newspapers survived radio, they survived TV. Newspapers are dying because they don't look like that anymore.
Right, that's right.
Okay. So anyway, Roy went down to Florida. There's a lot of Florida in this case for some reason. He developed a lead that a man nicknamed Smiley had killed the Bear Creek skeleton. Right. So they couldn't find nothing. They asked me if I could find something, and I turned up a guy in Smiley that was serving time in prison down in Florida for murder. It turned out to be Davis. Worrell went down there and interviewed him, and they determined, after a lot of hope built up again, they determined that he didn't have anything to do with the skeleton in North Carolina.
Right.
Although he did spend time in North Carolina at the time, but they found out that it wasn't him. So the roller coaster ride continues, right? Well, the media attention that came from that story caught the eye of a Florida man that had been searching for his daughter since she went missing in 1989, which fits the Bear Creek skeleton time frame, right? So this is Tiffany Sessions. She disappeared in 1989 from Gainesville, Florida. This is the most publicized missing persons case in Florida history.
Really?
Yeah, and you'll find out why here in a second. Tiffany's father was well connected, right? That's Dan Marino from Miami Dolphins. Picture of them two together. This guy, her dad was a real estate developer. He was extremely rich. So the time of Tiffany's disappearance and her physical description matches the Bear Creek skeleton. So they were like, that's got to be her, that's got to be her. Well, everything matched in the case but the DNA. So it wasn't her. So once again, another letdown. So, Tiffany's dad, he spent a fortune. He's still looking for me. He went broke trying to find her. That reward got up to millions of dollars before it was all over with, and still couldn't find her. So, Tiffany's story did kind of come to a sad end a couple of years ago. There's a real dirtbag named Paul Eugene Rolls right there. He was a serial killer that operated in Gainesville in the early 90s. And after he died in prison a couple of years ago, they found a journal that he kept in his jail cell with a lot of bad stuff and a lot of codes and stuff. And you'll see on that journal down at the bottom of the page, he's got number 2, and he's got 2989. Well, that's the day that Tiffany Sessions went missing.
Wow.
And he's got number 2, and he had in that other places in that journal, he had numbers described to all the victims that he was convicted of. So they're pretty sure that she was his second victim. He's got the day that she went missing on there. So they more or less kind of closed that case with him, you know.
Wow.
So, all right, so here's an article that I wrote about the Bear Creek skeleton back in 2012. So now they think that they're going to match the Bear Creek skeleton to this guy right here, Matthew Lorne Alder, who was a serial killer in Michigan. He was a Marine stationed down in Jacksonville area back in the 90s. A lot of women died back then. He was involved with some of them. They thought maybe they could match him to the Bear Creek skeleton, but that never came to pass. He's still a suspect to this day in the case, right? So there's I wrote an article about this. Of course, every week I write one for the Enterprise. It's shared with all the Restoration News Media papers and any newspaper that's in the area that we're talking about that chooses to share it. It's on. You can find it on the Interpage website. It's free. There's no paywall or anything like that. I go into a lot more detail about the skeleton. She had some sort of bone disease that is rare and recognizable. So maybe there's somebody out there that you know. And
then little clue.
Right, and then
clue is too small.
You're right, and I talk about the clothes that she wore, so somebody can look at that. The Onslow County Sheriff's Office held a press conference last year, and they talked about her. They've got some. You can see a bust there, and also with a photograph. They got with NCIS because Jacksonville is you know, big marine. I mean, Camp Leugene's the largest marine base in the world, so they have a lot of dealings with NCIS, which is the federal investigative agency that covers the Navy and the Marine Corps. They worked with Tulane University down in Louisiana, to develop that skeleton based on all the information that we have. So that's what they think is the best look for her now. Donnie Worrell was at that press conference, and he's been involved in that case since the very beginning. And he said that, you know, that's the one case that every detective has a case they wish they could solve. And he's already retired, but he did take over the reins of the Onslow County Crime Stoppers, which is a program that I used to be involved with years ago, which kind of inspired me to help found Team Cold Case. I modeled it after that, the success that program has had. This is the best guess of what she looked like in life, right there. I mean, that's the best that they can do. Remember, there's no jawline. There were some other problems that they had, but that's what they come up with. So she is familiar to anybody. They can contact the Onslow County Sheriff's Department at 910-455-3113, or Onslow County Crime Stoppers at 910-938-3273, or Team Cold Case at 252-406-6736. We were talking about the McNair case, and we said that her body, Lieutenant Sherrod said that her body was found by people riding four-wheelers, and you made the comment that how many people find, right. And in most of these unidentified cases, of course, there's more than 120 that we're talking about over a span of a couple of years. Now. We've been doing it for going on 3 months, right? Almost all these unidentified cases are found by people riding four-wheelers, hunters, or surveyors, right? Because they're the people that are out in the woods.
Oh, yeah.
Four-wheeler people are out in the woods. A lot of times they overlap. A lot of time four-wheelers are hunters.
Yeah.
They're using the four-wheelers to hunt. A lot of times the people, when they say a person on a four-wheeler, sometimes it's actually a surveyor because he's out on a four-wheeler.
That's right, they're on a four-wheeler.
So it's one of these three people, and sometimes a combination of them. In the Seven Bridges Road cases, a lot of those were found by the same people. They were found by hunters and by four-wheelers.
Because these bodies, no matter where they happen, the crime happens, they go out into these rural areas to dump them or whatever. So
absolutely. So they tried to put off them being found as long as possible.
Yeah,
you see in the
absolutely.
McNair case, it was 7 years, except for the skull that was moved for somebody to find it. In this case, they say that they think the Bear Creek skeleton she was dead for 2 or 3 years, which puts her back. I mean, they found it in December of '91, so that puts it back to 89, as early as 89. Now, also, you'll find that almost all of these bodies are being found in November, December. That's one, it's hunting season.
yes,
But also, that time of year, the foliage is way down.
and that's true too.
So-
Now, that's another point.
Yeah, and the Bear Creek skeleton was covered in foliage. I mean, she had roots and trees and all that had actually grown up, almost surrounded the body in what they call a bed of undergrowth. So, you wouldn't see that in the summertime. You'd walk right past it. But in the wintertime, when all that stuff dies off.
Right.
So, I mean, there's and also, because Thanksgiving and Christmas is a popular time to go hunting,
Right.
you'll see a lot of these bodies are found on Christmas and whatnot. So
That's right.
we'll get into all of these. And folks, like I'm calling this poor woman the Bear Creek skeleton, not out of disrespect or anything, but when you have 120 cases, you have to begin to identify them somehow.
Right.
And I don't want to use a number. So in each one of these cases, I've tried to find some way to identify them that people will remember in a way that I can keep track of them, because I mean we do have a lot, and we've got a lot right here in Nash County and Nash, Wilson, and Edgecombe County. There's a lot in your coverage area. There's a lot. As a matter of fact, most of the unidentified bodies in North Carolina are in this area.
Right.
Now, there's two reasons. There's two reasons for that. One is the fact that a lot of them are migrant workers from the 70s and 80s, and that's where this is the farm area of the state.
Right.
I think the other reason is just reporting. We don't know. We don't know if other counties in the west part of the state are reporting these things, properly. So I mean, there's that, and then the baby John Nash case that we kicked all this off with, that case has never been entered into NamUs, the national database for unidentified bodies. I know that law enforcement's working that case, because I got a call just 2 days ago about that case, that someone had been contacted by the police about it this week. So I mean, they're working the case. I think it would help a lot if that case was. Now, this is not law enforcement responsibility, because I found out. I contacted NamUs. I talked to the woman that's in charge for this region for NamUs, and she said that unidentified bodies can only be entered by medical examiners. Right?
Really?
Now, law enforcement anybody can enter missing persons as long as it's vetted through law enforcement. But law enforcement can enter missing persons, and they can remove missing persons cases when the person's found.
Right.
And there's a new law in North Carolina, just took effect last year, that if someone's been missing for 30 days, by law enforcement has to add them to the NamUs database. So the thing is, though, with unidentified bodies, if there's a disconnect between the investigating agency and the medical examiner for whatever reason, and that body doesn't get entered, there may have, there could be some good matches out there. We don't know.
That's right.
And then there's the case, I got a call not long ago from someone that was asking me to look into. There was a woman that was found in Middlesex many years ago, back in the 90s. She didn't have a head and she didn't have hands.
Oh my goodness.
Now, that is obviously an attempt. Prior to DNA, that was, if you took someone's hands and someone's head, it made it really hard to identify that person.
Right.
Now, I worked with Lieutenant Sherrard, and we determined not only had that woman been identified in the early 90s, but the case had also been resolved with an arrest. Wow. So not every unsolved case is unsolved, but I think that one of the biggest problems is these cases just didn't receive the media attention that they needed. We talked about that a few weeks ago with
media is important when it comes to stuff like
absolutely.
this.
The case in Lacoma where a person was shot in the back of the head and stripped of his clothes and buried beneath the barn, and everybody says it was an unintended death. Well, that's about, it wasn't unintended because somebody was there to shoot him and strip him and put him under the barn.
That's exactly right.
But that case received half a paragraph in the newspaper, and nothing since then. It's never been reported on since the day it happened. So that's what we're trying to do here, is get these cases out in a way that they can be found through internet search engines. The databases are great, but they, you can't search, you can't put in, the words that normal people would use and find these cases. But hopefully between what we're doing with putting these on YouTube, after they're broadcast we put them on YouTube, I'm running the stories in the Enterprise, the Wilson Times, the Creedmoor Butner News, the Wake Weekly, just any of the Restoration News media newspapers. They've been really nice to me about that. And then we've had some other papers. We had, when we did the case about the guy that was found in the mine pit. Remember, he had been shot in the back of the head. He was in his underwear. His fingernails had been pulled out. His teeth had been pulled out. Someone shot him in the back of the head. They threw him in a mine pit. The Chatham County paper ran that story as well. So it's nice to see in a dying business that my bosses have said, okay, we're gonna make sure that this story isn't behind a firewall on any website that we run it on, because the Enterprise doesn't have a firewall yet, so you can still read stuff on there free. But other newspapers in our company do have firewalls, but they have made sure that these stories so you can go and look at them for free. And then they also took the extra step to share these stories with any newspaper that want to run them. So they're being very I think they're being very community minded in that regard, that they're not making money off of this in the sense that they do most stores. And there's nothing wrong with making money off. I mean, we're all in a business, right?
Right, that's right.
So folks, the whole list of these stories are any story that you look at for online will have a link to all the other stories on the Enterprise's website, on the Wilson Times website. Give them a read through, share them with people, put them on the Facebook. I mean, there are some great DNA people that are working to solve some of these cases. Leslie Kaufman is one of them. She's a forensic genealogist. I talk to her a lot. But a lot of these cases don't have DNA in them. That there wasn't enough of the body to get DNA, or they destroyed the bodies prior to even understanding DNA. So the only way these cases are going to get solved, the only way that these people are going to, their families are going to find out who these people are, the only way that the people who killed them are going to be brought to justice is through publicity. And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, 406-6736 is the number to call if you know anything. It will be anonymous, and we pay out up to $15,000.
Right.
So it's important that if you know anything, that you contact that number or the proper authority. So thank you for watching. Thank you to Barnes Safety and Consulting, and thank you to Statewide Insurance Group for making this show possible.
Thank you.